Hey everybody, Bearded Rogue here, and I want to talk to you about Quivers. I know, something that I absolutely love, but I just recently received a pink Quiver, um, and I can add this to my purple prototype Quiver and my black Quiver for published games. This one's also going to be for published games. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is games that I feel are Quiver worthy. I personally have a bunch of games that I carry in my Quiver at all time, now my Quivers. And they're games that I absolutely love sharing with people that I already know how to play, and that are very portable thanks to this wonderful thing. But I see the same games, or several of the same games, crop up in other people's lists a lot of the time, and it's really cool to have that in common with somebody, to look at your Quiver and look at their Quiver and see, oh, well, we both like this game. It's just a neat little thing. It's also interesting to me that I think you could potentially create a very comprehensive list of games that appear in people's Quivers, and actually get statistical data on how many people who own Quivers have Coloretto in their Quiver. I would hazard a guess that it's fairly high. Coloretto's a really solid game. It fits really well in a Quiver, and it wouldn't surprise me at all that it's a very popular one. But there's all sorts of really popular games that end up in Quivers, and all sorts of kind of unknown and interesting games that end up in Quivers. All of those games are Quiver worthy. So what makes a game Quiver worthy? Well, first, it has to actually be a good game. I think that's a requirement. If you're going to use up some of the space in a finite container, it has to be a game that you at least enjoy playing. So that's the first criteria. Second one is the amount of space it takes up. There are a lot of games that I absolutely love, like Sentinels of the Multiverse. But Sentinels of the Multiverse fits in a box that's larger than my torso. Can't put it in a Quiver. You could put maybe one game's worth of Sentinels of the Multiverse in a Quiver. All of the heroes that you intend to use and no more, the one villain, the one environment, and the tokens. You could potentially hold a single game of Sentinels of the Multiverse in a Quiver if you wanted to transport it to somewhere else. But you can't hold all of Sentinels of the Multiverse in a Quiver. So I think the scale of the game also matters quite a bit when you're looking at whether or not a game is Quiver-worthy. I wouldn't rate Sentinels as Quiver-worthy, even though it's one of my favorite games of all time. Something like Android Netrunner, on the other hand, all you actually need to play is 2 decks and tokens, and that easily fits in a Quiver. So it's, some games just aren't going to work. Quivers also, unfortunately, don't hold boards. So unless you have an additional solution for storing a board or a playmat, Quiver is not your solution for that. So it usually ends up being mostly card games. Not 100% of the time, but mostly card games. Or cards plus things games. Cards plus tokens, cards plus, bits. That kind of thing. So, those are kind of the criteria. The amount of space they take up, whether or not they're enjoyable, and, are they worth bringing somewhere else? Can you play them somewhere else? Are there going to be other people who want to play the game somewhere else? Obviously, with your friends, you can often get a game to the table once, but, is it something that you're going to be playing regularly? That's another consideration. Is this a game that you want to play a lot? If so, having it somewhere portable is probably a good idea. I know some women who carry games in their purses. so that they have it on hand wherever they go. You know, I have a friend who has a deck of cards that they always carry on them in case, you know, they ever, you know, want to break out and play a game of euchre, or they want to, well, you need a very specific subset of a deck of cards for that, or, you know, various other card games. You know, do you want to play cribbage suddenly? Maybe. But you kind of need a board for that. Regardless, you know, there are some things that work and some things that don't. So I kind of wanted to look at what's in my quiver and look at what, you know, I kind of have in here. I haven't told everybody what's in my quiver for a while. I did a what's in my quiver video, I think it was maybe a year and a half ago, maybe more than that. So it's changed a little bit, especially now that I have two. So I can relax my standards a little bit and carry a few games that almost made the cut the first time. So what's in my quiver? So first thing you'll notice is button shy games. These little wallets are amazing for Quivers. Not only can they fit in the actual main body of the game, if you take them out of the wallet, you can leave them in the wallet, and they fit just fine in the mesh pocket up here with the rule books and stuff. That's a super convenient thing to bring with. Button shy games are usually pretty darn good. I have a few favorites, Circle the Wagons being one of them, Avignon here, Clash of Popes and its expansion being another, Head in the Clouds, Feet on the Ground. There's multiple button shy games. All of them are very quiver worthy, you know, depending on which ones you personally prefer. They fit really well, really great for a quiver. Next, I have a little game and its expansion called Welcome to the Dungeon and Welcome Back to the Dungeon. So, Welcome to the Dungeon is mostly cards. It features these tokens. Each character has a character token and then various pieces of equipment that you use when you play the game. And if you have both of them, I have mine bagged, but all of the tokens for all the characters fit here, and then here are the two sets of cards for Welcome to the Dungeon and Welcome Back to the Dungeon. They fit right here in this little area, and that covers both of those games. I really like both of those games. They're a neat little kind of pressure luck game where you either are, you know, you're kind of bragging about going into the dungeon with your friends, and it's either, you know, I'm going to add a monster to the dungeon, or I'm going to take away a piece of equipment, or eventually somebody's out. So in this big game of chicken, eventually somebody has to go through the dungeon, and if they survive, yay. If they don't, boo. But that's one that I always have with me and have had since I got my quiver. It's a game that I keep in there pretty much always. Next is a little game called Council Verona. This one right here is a kind of like a social deduction micro game in a few ways. Everybody is trying to score points, and you're basically scoring points based on where the Montagues and Capulets from Romeo and Juliet are at the end of the game, whether they're in the council or they're in exile. And you do that by placing your little tokens on these characters while they're out there. So basically you have to play a card from your hand each round, and you choose whether to play them on the council or play them in exile. You activate their particular ability, which may move cards around on the table, or you gain the option to put a token somewhere on the board, and the tokens are these things from the second edition, the little acrylic ones. I have the wooden ones as well from first edition, but they each have values. There's like a 0, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 or something like that. Oh, and if you have the expansion, there's poison and antidotes as well. And basically, you play these on the various characters, and then at the end of the game, all of them are revealed, and you score points based on where yours are. Um, there's a definite progression that occurs with the game, where initially everybody's kind of putting stuff out. Depending on what you drafted, you draft your initial set of cards that you're going to play over the course of the game. Depending on what you drafted, you may know exactly what you're going to do, or your strategy may change as it goes on, and you see what other people are kind of going for. Pardon me. It's a fun little game, and I find it to be highly Quiver Worthy. This is the game with its expansion. Let me hold this up. This is the game with its expansion, the Corruption expansion, which I haven't got a chance to play yet. I just recently got it. Fits very well inside the Quiver. I have the tokens bagged up here, and no problems there. Next, Mask Man. This is a neat little ladder climbing game about wrestlers. It's got this deck of cards and then a set of punchboard tokens that are all wrestler masks. And it's an Oink game. Like Button Shy, Oink games tend to have a fairly small footprint, which makes them kind of ideal for Quivers. You can fit an entire boxed Oink game inside of one of these. You can fit the whole thing. It will kind of fill up a large section, so I don't advise it. They take up much less space if you take them out of the box, because they're typically just cards plus. I recommend a lot of Oink games. Maskman is my personal favorite right now. Several of the others are really cool. I know Insider is a really good fit for a Quiver. Deep Sea Adventure fits really well inside of a Quiver. Startups, also another one. Like, Oink games are really good for this. And if you want to carry multiple Oink games at once, even though the boxes aren't terribly large, this is more convenient in general. So next is a game that I think is like top of the list as far as Quiver Worthy games, and that's a little game called No Thanks. The cards are here. The whole game is a small deck of cards right here, plus some tokens. That's it. That's how much space the whole game takes up. There's a rule booklet up there too, but it's a game that plays a large group of people and has very minimal space. It's also one of, in my opinion, the best numbers on cards games of all time, and so it definitely meets the this is quality enough. It also meets the space requirements really well. I think No Thanks has a place in pretty much everybody's Quiver. If you don't like No Thanks, sorry, but I think that so many people do, and it takes up so little space that it's a really good addition to any Quiver, regardless of which edition of No Thanks you get. Next is a game that I'm using a little bit more real estate for. It's all of these cards plus these coins, and that's Medici the card game. As you can see here, Medici the card game is all of these, everything to the left of the, would this be right? I don't know. All of these cards right here, next to the No Thanks chips, are all Medici the card game cards. And that's a game that I was introduced to by Beth Sobel and her husband. We played it at BGG-Con and then played it again at a local convention in Portland called Game Storm. Right now I'm undefeated in this game. I've either won or tied for first every time I've played it, which is very, very bizarre for me in a game. But hey, I'm not going to knock it. I really enjoy the game, even if I wasn't, winning at it all the time. But it's definitely a game that I feel is Quiver worthy. Coloretto, game I mentioned a little earlier. This is another one like No Thanks that has a very tiny footprint. This is it. Coloretto doesn't have any tokens. It's literally just these cards. that I think should be in every quiver. Like, if you started your quiver with No Thanks and Colorado as your first two games and then filled it with a whole bunch of other stuff that you like, I think your quiver would already be in a pretty good spot. Both of those games are superb games. And really quick to teach, really easy. The rule books I have in here, but usually I don't need them because I play it often enough, and a lot of people in the board game world are familiar with them already, so you don't need to teach them. Really solid games, just in general. Next game I have in here is Fuji Flush, which is another numbers on cards game. Fuji Flush is a Friedman Fries game that plays a decently large group of people. What I like about it is, again, it's extremely easy to teach, and takes up very little space. It takes up about the same amount of space as Colorado does. Them side by side. And I really dig it. It's a really cool game, especially for like the end of the night when everybody who's remaining is mostly brain dead for longer games. Fuji Flush is a great game to take out at that point and play. Next, I have this is a game that has two names. It's either Linko or a Bluxen, depending on where you buy it from. This is a game that I absolutely love. I guess it's a ladder climbing game, sort of. Ladder climbing shedding game, but really, really super solid card game. I have the Bluxen edition. The rule book is up here as well, but I really, really enjoy that one and don't get to play it as often as I would like, so it has a near permanent spot in my quiver now so that I can get to play it at all. Next is Honshu. Honshu is kind of an auction type game, sort of, combined with trick taking plus tile laying. I don't know how to really describe it other than that I really, really love it. Basically, you have a card. You have a bunch of cards like this in your hand. Each card has 6 spaces that are different terrain types of a village, and then it has a number at the bottom. So you play them from your hand like a trick-taking game, with the number at the bottom. Whoever has the highest number gets to pick the card first. And it doesn't have to be the card that you played. It could be another person's card. And then the next person picks a card, etc., etc. So you end up building this city and then scoring points based on what's connected to what, and how big of a lake you have, how big of a city you have. They have various spaces like this that are delivery spaces. Like this place wants stone. You need a place that produces stone, and then you can score that as well. It's this deck plus a bag of cubes right here, and then a rule book. Again, takes up about the same amount of space as like Colorado or Fuji Flush or No Thanks. Really a no-brainer. When I first played it, I kind of fell in love with it, and it allows you to have tile laying in a game that fits in a quiver, which I really like. Then I have my copy of The Mind right here, because everybody should have a copy of The Mind whenever they can. I really like The Mind. There's a lot of people who say, oh, well, it's an activity, it's not a game. I really love it. I think it's a great little card game. It fits really well in a quiver. It's perfect for that. Then up here, like I said, I have the Button Shy games. I have the score pad for Honshu, tokens for Medici, and Council of Verona, and then all of my rule books and such fit up here in this one. And that's my first quiver, which has been rearranged a little bit since the last time I talked about it. Now we get to my second quiver. And my second quiver is my new one here. And inside you'll see a couple of things. Again, another Button Shy game. This one is Head in the Clouds. And then I've got a whole bunch of rule books and some tokens. But I also have Coinage, in here, which is a game that like is literally one card plus tokens. You can play it with pocket change. I have the punch board money tokens from the Kickstarter, and then Province, which is a tiny little worker placement type game from Laboratory Games that I picked up. It's 2-player only, but this is a cool little one that fits really well up here in my quiver. I need to put it behind coinage for it to work well. But yeah, Province and coinage, and then a whole bunch of rule books and button shy games, and then in here we've got the rest of the quiver. This one isn't quite as full yet. As far as like, there's a lot more wiggle room in here. I may rearrange some of this stuff. I may swap some games back and forth between the quivers based on space constraints to try to figure out, you know, if I could get an additional game or two in. But games in this one include Shot and Totten, which is Battle Line, if you would rather use that name. Shot and Totten fits right here. It's got the tokens for the various lanes where you play cards, and then the actual cards themselves, and my rule book is up here. It's a really super cool 2-player game. I was taught it by Chris Rollins at BGGCon a couple years ago, and I immediately went into the vendor hall and bought it upon playing it. Really cool game. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorite 2-player card games, and it's another one of those you can just whip out and play really quickly. So, Shot and Totten. And then here I have Hanabi. Hanabi is another co-op card game like The Mind. Hanabi used to be in my primary case. The Mind is now currently occupying the spot that it was in. I say primary case, but both of these are pretty much going everywhere with me. Just The Mind took up a little bit more room, even though Hanabi has tokens. But I had to have Hanabi. It was... It doesn't play like any other card game, and so I really enjoy that. I love co-ops. I also love the concession of the cards facing away from you, so that you don't know what your own hand is. So Hanabi was kind of a no-brainer for me to include. Next, I have a game that you may not have heard of, but that's Heir to Europa. Heir to Europa is a game that I discovered at Unpub a couple of years ago. It is a trick-taking game where the cards change value over the course of the game based on how many of them have been played. I really love this game. I love the art direction for this game. I love the gameplay of this game. I just absolutely love this game, and it's been in my quiver since I bought it. I would never move this one. It's always going to be in my quiver in some capacity. One of the two in this case, because it's a really solid little trick-taking game. Plays 4 really, really well, and I like it a lot. Next is another tile-laying game, in this case, Knoxford. Knoxford is a game I discovered at BGGCon this year. And it's another cards as tiles game, which is really cool. Let me see if I can find some of these things. So yeah, so each player has certain, basically, workers that they can play that have various strengths, and then you're trying to use that to exercise control over the various, oh, that's a police officer. That's also a police officer. What is going on here? Also a police officer. All the police officers are apparently on top. You must have to shuffle a certain number in based on player count, but there are these various districts which are marked by these icons on them, and you're trying to control certain districts using the strength of your particular thieves. I think they're thieves. Either way, it's pretty cool. There are the police that I showed you earlier. You can place them out on the field and they stop or eliminate the strength of anybody that they're touching, any of the thieves that they're touching. So it's a neat little tile laying game in a card format that fits in this much space. So I was really, oh, sorry, this much space. I was really excited to have another tile laying game in here, like Honshu, but in the other case that I have. Next is another trick-taking game, because I love trick-taking games, called Schneebel. This one I played at Unpub a couple of years ago. I played with Prototype Card Art. They kickstarted it. What makes this game unique is that you're dealt your hand, and then every player rolls a die, and that determines how many tricks you need to take for this round, or this hand of cards. So rather than betting your tricks, you're basically given a random amount of tricks that you have to take, and then you have to figure out how to best play your hand to make that happen. Very different way of playing a trick-taking game. Much more about being able to evaluate your hand and the cards in it and when to play what. Very, I won't say thoughtful, but it makes me think much more than when you look at a hand of spades and go, well, I've got, the top 3 spades, so I'm taking those 3 hands at least. It's got a little bit more to it because there's several times where you don't want to take hands. Next is a game called Entropy, which is a neat little game that I have not gotten to play very much, but it thematically everybody is working to basically try to restore their reality, their personal reality, from the various shards of realities that exist. But each player has cards that they can play that do various things like expose or fracture, and each one has numbers. They're numbered cards, so it's like simultaneous action selection. So everybody plays their stuff at the same time, and then there's a card that breaks ties that exists in the game. The anchor here that breaks ties, and that way simultaneous action selection works with multiple players, even if people play the same thing. Neat little game. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but that's one of the reasons I put it in my Quivers, because it doesn't take up a lot of space right now, and I really want to get it to the table. So putting it in my Quiver is one way to make sure that that happens. Next is Okie Dokie, because again I like co-op games, and this is a cool little one that I want to play more. So another co-op card game. Next is Cobras, another trick-taking game. If you can't tell, I like trick-taking games. This one is another one where you're evaluating which cards you want to take. I need to play this one more. I've only played it once since I got the Kickstarter, hence why it's in this one, and wasn't in the original one. Same thing goes for the game Birds of a Feather. I really want to play this one. I haven't gotten a chance to yet, so it's in my Quiver. Then we have this section here, where I have a lot of cards that are sideways, and the reason why is because underneath Yin and Yang, which is another trick-taking, in this case a Nitsia game that you may know better as Relationship Tightrope. In here I have Coup, which uses larger size cards than poker cards, so they don't fit like this. They have to fit like this. And then last but not least, in the bottom here is Smile, which also uses big old tarot cards. So I just put Smile in the bottom, Ku on it, Yin Yang on it, and everything fits. So that's what's currently in my 2 Quivers as far as everything goes. There are 2 games I want to put in my Quivers and do not have space for right now. So as I play games and figure out what I like, the contents of these may change. But 2 other Quiver-worthy games that I wanted to bring up are Kershey Robin Hood. This is, again, Smart Play Games, Daniel Solis, specifically, another numbers on cards games. Yet another one of my favorite genres. Pardon me. But again, in this one, everybody's basically playing against a legend, and it's harder to describe than it is to play. Haven't read the rules in a long time, but I got this to the table when I first bought it and played it a whole bunch, like several weeks in a row. This was the only game that we played at game night, and that was a couple years ago, but really solid game. I really want to get it into my Quiver, but I wasn't able to make it fit, and I put some stuff that I really want to play in there. This may find its way back in. If the stuff that's in there now ends up being stuff that isn't to my taste, this one may find its way back in. The other one is a beautiful game called Hocus. The card backs still blow my mind. This is from the now defunct Hyperbole Games. Has one of the wooden tokens that came with the that's a promo, but Hocus is kind of like wizard poker. It uses a Texas Hold'em style river in the middle of the table, and you play cards to your hands to make poker hands, and you play cards to your pots to determine what you score for your poker hands. It's a very neat little game. There are asymmetric powers in it. I really like it. It has been in my Quiver in the past. It took up a spot. It was the other one that I removed so I could fit a game that I haven't played yet in there. It's also quite likely to jump back in once I test the others and can gauge whether I like the stuff that I haven't played yet more than it or not. But all of that's what's in my Quiver. There are a whole bunch of other things that I've looked at. I've looked at creating a solo Quiver at one point, just taking all of the Oniverse games, Onirim, Sylveon, Urbion, and those, that series of games, plus like Friday, and maybe some other solo stuff. Hostage Negotiator could fit in there, or at least some of it could. Various things like that. Like creating a solo games Quiver would be kind of cool to be able to bring with me on like work trips where I'm stuck in the hotel room all night by myself. But there's a lot of games out there that are Quiver worthy. These are the ones that I have deemed Quiver worthy right now from my collection. There are various more that I feel are Quiver worthy but may not fit based on just space concerns. Again, a Quiver is a finite container, and I may start looking at trying to create some loadouts for myself so that I can make sure that I have like a 2-player game, a game that can seat 3, a game that can seat 4, 5, a game that can seat more than that. Having a game that plays 6 players, having a mixture of co-op games and competitive games, having trick takers in both Quivers, so that I have one with me regardless of which quiver I bring. You know, separating out the co-op games so that I have a co-op card game with me regardless of which quiver I'm taking. That sort of thing. Just create a loadout so that I can have like a good mix of games of various types and experiences inside of something this size. I love these things. They're absolutely my favorite gaming accessory, regardless of which color they are in. And I think that as a community, you know, these are extremely valuable to us, because they allow me and other people to take a whole bunch of games in a very tiny space. Like, these check just fine through TSA, so I can bring them to conventions. They fit in a backpack, or at least they fit in my backpack, which is a hiking backpack. The one I showed earlier with all the pins on it. I can fit 2 quivers in it comfortably. Usually one of my published game quivers and a prototype, my prototype quiver when I'm going to a con. So yeah, like, they're super useful, and being able to bring my love of games, and particularly card games, on the go is the greatest thing ever, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm glad to have another one in my collection, and I'm glad to be able to go over what I'm carrying in my quiver and what games I personally have deemed quiver worthy. If you guys want to share what's in your quiver, I would love to hear about that. If there's anything you think I'm definitely missing, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't have this in your quiver, I would love to hear that too. But anyway, I'm glad that you stayed to the end. If you did, thank you very, very much. 2 long videos here for the weekend, but I had the time to record, so I figured why not. Anyway, I'll let you guys go now, and I'll see you again tomorrow.